Have you ever been asked to move out of your seat, not because of what you did, but because of who you are? Imagine sitting in the VIP section, ticket in hand, confidence in your heart, when someone taps your shoulder and says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, this seat isn't for you." What would you do in that moment? Would you swallow the humiliation to avoid a scene or stand up, risking everything you've worked for, just to remind the world that dignity has no color? This is the true story of Dr. Maya Carter, a black CEO who was asked to give up her seat for a white passenger, and 5 minutes later made a decision that would shake an entire airline and redefine justice in America. If you were in her place, what choice would you make? Because sometimes justice doesn't come with anger. It comes with grace, power, and quiet courage. Stay with us, and let this story remind you what it truly means to rise above prejudice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Dr. Maya Carter sat silently in a glass office on the 60th floor of Carter Dynamics. The early morning light from Seattle was a soft mist, reflecting off the dark wood of her desk. An email draft was open on her phone. The subject line was simple: emergency personnel change. Grant Aviation. With one tap, she could put 15 people out of work and an airline on its path to history. She looked down at her hands. The fingers were slender and steady, but there was a slight tremor, not from power, but from memory. It had all started less than 2 days ago. The narrator's voice paused for a moment, then softened. Maya took a deep breath, her eyes still glued to the phone. Her mother's words echoed in her head, her voice hoarse from years ago. "Child, when the world tries to make you small, let your personality grow." A smile flickered across her face, both sad and proud. She pressed send. The soft ding sound echoed sharply in the quiet room. Outside the window, Seattle was still wet with mist. Little did anyone know that, just a few minutes later, a chain of events would begin, an event that would usher in a revolution of justice and compassion. She gently closed her phone and leaned back in her chair. In that moment, her eyes were half closed, but her mind was open 24 hours ago, where it all started, on an ordinary flight. The narrator's voice is lower, slower, warm, and curious. 36 hours ago, I was just a passenger. Now, I am the one who decides the future of that entire airline. A gentle breeze blew through the glass windows, carrying with it the steam of the city. Below, the streets were still crowded. No one knew that a woman was about to rewrite the definition of justice. Maya Carter's apartment was high in a historic building on the Upper West Side. Dawn filtered through sheer curtains, casting gold streaks across the wooden table where she sat, over a cup of cold black coffee. She checked her schedule on her tablet. Tomorrow morning meeting with the Grant Aviation Board in Seattle. Flight number 9, 15 a.m., GA 203. Outside the window, New York was waking up, car horns honking, the smell of baked goods wafting from street corners. She loved the city, which had taught her 2 great lessons: resilience and silence. Ever since she was the first black student in her class of MIT Energy Mechanics PhD students, Maya had grown accustomed to skeptical looks. They used to call her token diversity, a polite way of saying she was chosen for diversity policy, not talent. She smiled as she remembered the first day she presented her thesis. A professor had asked Carter, "Do you think a woman of color can lead a world-class energy company?" She responded with a smile and a complete equation, which silenced the room. Now, The question echoed in her head every time she walked into a conference room full of white men, and perhaps that was what calmed her more than anyone else. The phone rang. It was her assistant, Ethan Miles, calling. "Maya, I've sent in the final merger documents. Grant's board seems skeptical that a woman-led company can handle their losses." She took a sip of coffee, her voice soft. "Let them be skeptical. Doubt distracts them, and we don't." She stood up and walked to the closet. Her white shirt was pressed. Her navy suit hung neatly. Each movement was slow and precise. On her left wrist, her mother's watch still gleamed, the only gift she had left her before she died. Maya grew up in suburban Atlanta, in a small cabin with her mother and younger brother. Her mother, a nurse, often worked double shifts just to pay for her schooling. "You have to study well," her mother said, "because when people don't see your skin color, they will see your achievements." That sentence was like a red thread running through her life. She had never let herself slide, not a scandal, not a mistake, not a single time she let her emotions overwhelm her. But sometimes that strength made her feel lonely. On the desk, the small photo of her and the research team from back then was still there. She touched it lightly and let out a small sigh. How far have we come? Maya. The question echoed in her mind, needing no answer. Her alarm clock rang, reminding her that it was time to leave for the airport. She packed her laptop, some documents, and the old leather notebook where she'd been writing down her thoughts on justice, equality, and how people could live more kindly in a world full of boundaries. Going down the hall, she caught the eye of the building's security guard, an elderly black man. He smiled and greeted her in a friendly voice. "Good morning, Dr. Carter. Flying again. Yes, the sky again. Mr. Henry. But this time, perhaps, it will be different." She spoke softly. No one understood the hidden meaning behind her words. The black car slid on the damp road. She looked at the bustling crowd, her eyes following the unfamiliar faces. Somewhere, there were probably still people who did not believe that a woman like her could sit at the top of a technology empire. When the car stopped at JFK Airport, she pulled her suitcase down herself, without the driver's help. A small gesture, but a lot said Maya Carter never wanted others to think she was weak. At the check-in area, she looked at the long line of people, the loudspeaker announcing continuously. A ticket counter staff recognized her, slightly surprised. "Oh, Mrs. Carter. I read about your company in Forbes last week." "Really?" She laughed. "Did they mention I like my coffee without sugar?" A light joke lightens the mood. She has a way of making people smile without even trying. After completing the procedure, she walked through the security area. The metallic light from the scanner reflected on her calm face. She was tall, walking slowly and confidently. People looked at her, but few realized that she was the person preparing to buy the airline they were waiting in line to board. The merger plan was still running through her head. Grant Aviation, an old name, was drowning in debt and scandal. But for Maya, it was more than just a business opportunity. It was a chance to prove something bigger that the once overlooked could take over the skies. As we passed through the first-class lounge, a young woman holding a laptop stood up and greeted us. "You're Dr. Carter, right. I work in the solar lab. You're the reason I chose this field." Maya paused. Words like this always touched her. "Thank you. But remember, never follow someone else's path. Walk in your own footsteps." The young woman nodded, her eyes bright. Maya looked out the large window where a plane had just left the runway. White smoke streaked across the gray sky. She whispered, "Tomorrow, everything will change." The phone vibrated again. Ethan sent a text message. Grant confirmed that they will close the deal at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You will become the largest shareholder. She typed back, "Good. I just hope they are ready for the change they can't imagine." When the speaker called for flight GA203, she took her ticket and walked towards the departure gate. Her figure blended into the crowd, her gait graceful yet determined. She had no idea that, just a few hours later, the sky would test everything she believed in about fairness, dignity, and humanity. The imaginary camera stops at the scene of her high heels touching the polished floor. The narrator's voice drops. Sometimes, we don't know which flight is going to change the direction of our lives until it takes off. The JFK business class lounge was crowded but quiet. The luxurious space was bathed in yellow lights. The smell of coffee mixed with the steady sound of loudspeaker announcements. Maya Carter walked in, holding a ticket and a small paper cup. Everything was normal until she felt a few eyes on her, brief, long enough for a discerning eye to notice her hesitation. The woman at the reception desk checked her ticket, her voice slightly halting. "Excuse me, this is the first-class area. Are you sure Maya gave her boarding pass?" and smiled slightly. "Sure. I was just about to ask if you wanted to see any identification." She spoke softly, without the slightest hint of anger. Her smile was still there, but her eyes were so calm that it made the person opposite her feel embarrassed. The staff quickly apologized and opened the door for her to pass. A thought flashed through Maya's mind. After all these years, the world still hasn't learned to judge people by their abilities, not their skin color. She sat down, opened her laptop, and typed a few notes for tomorrow's meeting. Soft jazz played from the speakers, but her mind was elsewhere about times like this. When she was 28, a professor mistook her for a waitress at an international conference and asked her to pour water. She poured water, then went on stage to present her invention, which received a standing ovation. Since then, she has learned to let her success speak for itself. A laugh rang out from a group of businessmen nearby. They were talking about stocks, their voices loud and confident. One of the men glanced at Maya, then whispered to his colleague, "I think she's in the wrong place. She looks like some kind of assistant, not a first-class passenger." She heard clearly, still no response, just closed the laptop, took out her headphones, and turned on some soft music. Music was her way of keeping calm, because if every insult made her angry, she probably wouldn't have gotten to where she was today. On the phone, Ethan Miles sent a text message. "Grant Aviation has confirmed that they are ready to meet you at 9 a.m. I will pick you up at the Hilton." She typed back, "Good. Stay in touch. I want this flight to be uneventful." Peace, she thought. A simple wish that not everyone has. The waiting room door opened and the flight attendants from GA203 entered. The leader was a blonde woman in her 40s, slim, with cold eyes, Evelyn Brooks, the head stewardess. She glanced around, stopping when she saw Maya. She flashed a polite smile, then turned away. Little did Maya know that in just a few hours, Evelyn would be the one testing the limits of her patience. Her name was called over the loudspeaker. "First-class passengers on flight GA203 to Seattle. Please proceed to the departure gate." Maya stood up, picked up her suitcase, and walked out. She stood straight, each step steady. A middle-aged man behind her whistled softly and said to his friend, This kind of woman is really arrogant. Let's see if she's still arrogant when she's reminded of her place." A soft laugh rang out. She listened, but only pursed her lips. Strangely enough, her silence annoyed the taunts more than her response. At the boarding gate, Evelyn was waiting. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice strained with sweetness. Maya nodded slightly. "Thank you. Enjoy your flight." Maya paused as she entered the cabin. She took in the smell of the new leather seats, the sound of the wind blowing through the windows, and the rare privacy of first class. Seat 3A, by the window. She set down her bag, removed her coat, and took a deep breath. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But deep inside, there was still a vague, low note, a feeling of unease, as if the sky was about to blow. Maya watched the passengers enter. Most were men in suits, carrying briefcases. They spoke in familiar tones, laced with contempt, the self-assuredness of those who think they are on a higher plane. She was used to that kind of energy. A young flight attendant brought a glass of orange juice. "Would you like some newspaper or coffee?" "Thanks. Just be quiet." She smiled slightly, her eyes looking out the window. Before takeoff, the phone vibrated again. It was a text message from Ethan. "The flight has Ryan Holt, Grant's main investor. If you see him, be polite. He's conservative and tests people." Maya looked at the screen, frowning slightly. Ryan Holt. She'd heard that name before. A man known for his arrogance and prejudice. The flight attendant announced the cabin door was closing. Maya folded her phone, leaned her head back on the seat, and closed her eyes. As the engine started, she felt her heart sink, a nameless fatigue. She whispered, "We just need to get there. We can worry about everything else tomorrow." The voice in her head softened, turning to memories of her mother. Her mother had once said, "When you fly, don't be afraid of the sky. It's only as big as your heart." Those words always calmed her down. Maya smiled slightly, but her smile faded when she heard a noise behind her. A group of late passengers, talking loudly. One of them, a deep male voice, rang out clearly. "They must have given me the wrong seat. I always book 3A. She opened her eyes. Footsteps approached. The person's voice was clear and cold. "Excuse me. Ma'am, this seat is mine." Ryan Holt stood in front of her, ticket in hand, looking annoyed. Evelyn followed, her eyes averted. "Mr. Holt," she said softly, "my ticket says seat 3A. There must be a mistake." Evelyn interjected, her voice trying to stay calm. "We'll check right away. Sir." She turned to Maya, her smile thin. "There may be a system error. Mrs. Carter, please cooperate in changing seats." Maya looked straight ahead, her voice calm. "I booked this ticket 3 days ago. I see no reason to move." The cabin suddenly fell silent. A few glances turned toward them. No one said anything, but awkwardness filled the air. Evelyn frowned slightly. "Madam, please understand. Mr. Holt is a long-time customer." Maya put her hands on the armrest and tilted her head slightly. "I am also a customer, and I think every passenger should be respected equally." Her voice was not loud, but it was enough to make Evelyn flinch. A moment of silence stretched. The sound of the engine outside the window seemed more distant. Then, it was Ryan Holt who broke the ice. "If you don't give up, I'll talk to the airline manager. I don't fly in the middle seat." Maya let out a soft breath. She looked around and saw a few people secretly filming. She picked up her phone, pressed the record button, and said in a low voice, "Okay, I'll move to another chair, but we'll see who shouldn't be here." She stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked across the aisle. People moved aside. Little did anyone know, that moment when she was forced out of seat 3A would set in motion a turn of events that would bring the entire airline to its knees. The atmosphere in the cabin was heavy as Maya Carter was led away. She didn't resist. She didn't say another word. She just kept her posture straight, her steps slow but determined. Eyes followed her, some pitying, some curious, some slightly mocking. Evelyn led her down to the economy cabin, where the sounds of conversation and creaking seats mingled together in a cacophony of noise. A young passenger was nodding along to the music with headphones on. The man in the middle seat was dozing, his large frame taking up more than half the space. Evelyn pointed to the empty middle seat. "Sorry for the inconvenience. Mrs. Carter, this is the only seat left." Maya nodded slightly, her voice small but clear. "I understand. Thank you." She sat down, the seat feeling tight, her knees almost touching the back of the seat in front of her. The silence inside her was heavy as a stone, not because of the seat, but because of familiarity. This discrimination, she had faced it all her life. Only, she didn't think that, after being the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, she would still have to endure it on a commercial plane. A boy sitting in front turned around, his eyes curious. "Miss, why are you sitting here? I saw you up there just now." She smiled gently. Sometimes people need to learn to be fair again. "My dear." The boy nodded without understanding, then returned to his toys. Beside him, the fat man muttered, "You must have caused trouble to be transferred here." Maya did not reply. She opened her phone, turned on recording, and recorded the entire incident. The careful habit of someone who had faced too many injustices. The plane lifted off. The engines roared softly, the pressure making her ears ring. She tried to close her eyes, but her mind wouldn't settle. Ryan Holt kept flashing through her mind, his faint smile, his disdainful eyes, and Evelyn's fleeting look of confusion, both afraid and eager to prove her meager power. The flight attendant's voice came over the loudspeaker. "We apologize for the delay. You can have your drinks in a few minutes." She looked out the small window and saw layers of white clouds rolling across the sun. The dim light reflected off her calm face, but inside her heart, a storm was brewing. A voice beside her startled her. "I know you." The speaker was a young woman sitting in the aisle seat, her eyes bright and sincere. "You're Maya Carter." "Right. I saw your TED Talk on sustainable energy last year. You inspired me." Maya was a little surprised. She smiled and nodded in thanks. "Thank you. I'm glad to hear that." The woman lowered her voice. "I saw what happened upstairs. You don't deserve this treatment. I recorded a bit of it, if you need proof." The sentence made Maya's heart flutter. She looked at the woman longer, then said softly, "Thank you. Maybe that video will be needed." At that moment, Maya knew, even though the world is full of injustice, there are still people who dare to stand on the side of justice. A moment later, the flight attendant served drinks. The woman named Leah Parker, as Maya later learned, received water. Maya, when she asked for a cup of tea, was refused. "Sorry, this cabin only serves coffee and water." The young, emotionless voice of the flight attendant. Leah looked on, shaking her head. "They don't even bother to hide the way they treat each other." Maya smiled. "Don't be upset. She's just doing what she's taught. It's not her that needs to change. It's the person who taught her to behave that way. The steady hum of the plane, mixed with the tapping of a keyboard, Maya turned on her computer and tried to work. But her heart was heavy. She remembered what Ethan had said last night. Grant Aviation has a very conservative culture. You should be careful. She laughed. Now she understood that conservative was a gentle way of saying deeply ingrained prejudices. After nearly 2 hours, the sound of chatter up ahead caught her attention. A passenger whispered, "I heard there was a female CEO who got fired from the top class. She was rich, but they still did it." "Unbelievable," the other replied. "If that's true, Grant will be in big trouble." Leah looked at Maya with worried eyes. "Looks like word is getting around." Maya nodded. "Things always find their way to light." Leah. The economy class was cramped, but the eyes of the people sitting around him changed. From curiosity to respect, from indifference to sympathy. A young man sitting in the back row leaned over and said in a low voice, "I am a freelance reporter. If you allow me, I can rewrite this story, not to cause a scandal, but to tell the truth." Maya replied, still keeping her voice calm. "The truth does not need to be embellished. Just write exactly what you see." As the plane flew over the Rockies, Maya checked her phone for Wi-Fi. A message from Ethan popped up. "Are you okay?" "There are rumors online about an incident on flight GA203. She typed back, "Fine. Just a little test before we get them." A smile crossed her lips, not from gloating, but from realizing that fate was opening up in another direction. A moment later, Evelyn walked through the compartment, avoiding Maya's gaze. She put her hand on a passenger's shoulder and whispered something. Maya knew she had made a mistake, but Maya didn't want to talk right now. She needed the silence to think. She opened her notes app and typed a line, not revenge, but redress, thoroughly and systematically. The words were like a self-imposed command. She was thinking not just of herself, but of the hundreds of others who had been treated similarly but had no voice. About 3 hours later, the plane was about to descend. She could feel the pressure in her chest, not just from the air, but from the restraint. Leah looked at her and said softly, "What will you do when you land?" Maya replied, looking out the window where the clouds were clearing. "I will remind them that sometimes justice does not need a voice. It just needs a signature at the right time." The plane shuddered as it touched down. Maya let out a sigh, but her gaze remained sharp. She knew the real storm had just begun. She closed her laptop, looked back at the crowded seats, and smiled to herself. "The world may bring me down, but I will rise and bring the system up with me." As the plane touched down on the Seattle runway, Maya Carter opened her eyes and took a deep breath. The metal brakes screeched. Passengers fumbled with their seat belts. People stood up, grabbed their luggage, and chatted. She remained seated, her eyes fixed on the window. The sky was a pale gray, a few drops of rain rolling down the glass. No one knew that behind that calm appearance. Maya's heart was stirring with a determination clearer than ever. Leah gently touched her shoulders. "Maya, I sent you a video on your phone. It shows the entire moment you were asked to leave your seat. It includes Evelyn and Ryan." She nodded, looking at the screen. The clip was just over a minute long, but it was clear enough. Ryan's voice, Evelyn's voice, and the silence of the onlookers. No need for justification. It spoke for itself. "Thank you, Leah. Maybe the world needs to see this. I just want justice to be seen." Leah replied, her voice small but firm. The plane door opened, and a rush of humid air rushed in. Evelyn stood at the exit, her smile stiff, her apology book in hand as usual. As Maya passed, she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Carter. It was all a misunderstanding." Maya paused, her eyes not cold, just tired. "No, Evelyn, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a consequence." Without further ado, she left the plane. Right at the exit, a group of company employees were waiting, their faces worried. A man in a suit stepped forward. "I'm sorry, Dr. Carter. We've received a report of an incident on the flight. The airline will conduct an internal investigation and issue a formal apology." She replied simply, "I don't need an apology. I need change." Those words stunned the group. Then she turned and walked away, her figure small but full of power. At baggage claim, the phone kept ringing. Social media was abuzz. Someone posted Leah's video on Twitter with the caption, "When a black CEO was pulled out of first class to make way for a white passenger." Within 30 minutes, the clip had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Comments poured in. "I can't believe this is still happening. She's the CEO. Grant. Aviation is dead. I respect you for keeping your cool." Maya stared at the screen, not smiling. She understood that social media could fuel the flames of justice, but it could also fuel the flames of hatred. What she wanted was not temporary anger, but real change. The phone rang. It was Ethan Miles. "Maya, are you okay? The internet is talking about it. Grant's office is in chaos. They just issued an emergency internal memo." "I'm fine." "Ethan, go to the hotel first. I'll be there later. And don't do anything, at least for now." She hung up and dragged her suitcase toward the door. The pieces of her plan began to come together in her mind. Part of her felt bitter, while the other part felt clear. The truth was a more powerful weapon than any promise on the negotiating table. Late afternoon, in the lobby of the Hilton Hotel, Maya sat alone in a small cafe. On the table was a laptop open, the screen displaying a draft of the Grant Aviation Corporate Culture Assessment Report. She reread her old notes where it had been written, "Grant's problem is not financial, but mental." Now, living proof confirmed it. Leah texted, "The clip is going viral. The press wants to interview her." She replied, "I won't answer anyone. Let the truth speak for itself." Outside, Seattle was beginning to light up. The buildings reflected a pale yellow light on the water. Maya watched with a sense of peace. That evening, she received an email from Grant Aviation CEO Samuel Grant. "Dr. Carter, we deeply regret the unfortunate incident that occurred. The company will take disciplinary action against the employee and issue a public apology. We look forward to tomorrow's merger meeting continuing as planned." Maya finished reading, put down her phone, and shook her head slightly. A smooth, perfect apology, but empty. She opened her laptop and typed a few new lines into the report. "The culture of apology is just about image. It cannot replace real justice." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes unfocused. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let it all go, but another part, a deeper, stronger part, was urging her to do something to make people like Evelyn, like Ryan Holt, like the system look at themselves. The night passed slowly. Rain began to fall, the lights reflected in thousands of bright drops. Maya turned on the TV. The local news was broadcasting a special report. A video of a passenger being asked to leave her first-class seat has gone viral. The victim has been identified as Dr. Maya Carter, CEO of Carter Dynamics. A Grant Aviation representative said the investigation is underway. The reporter ended with a comment. Perhaps this is not just a misunderstanding, but a reminder that racism still permeates every class. Maya looked at the screen, her eyes silent. She didn't like being famous this way, but she knew that once the light was on, the shadows had to retreat. The next morning, 6 o'clock, the phone rang, waking her up. It was Ethan Grant Aviation, just called an emergency meeting. They want to see you before the signing. There's an inside story. Some shareholders are worried the deal will be canceled. They're right to be afraid. But they don't understand that I don't want to cancel the deal. I want to redefine it. Her voice was firm. She stepped out onto the balcony. The breeze was cool. The smell of morning coffee wafted through the air. Below, the city was quiet, as if nothing had happened. But Maya knew that within those buildings, a whole system of power was shaking. She texted Leah back, "Thank you. Please keep the original video. If they try to deny it, we will let the public know the truth." Another text message from Ethan came in. "Samuel Grant asked to see you privately before the session. It seems they want to settle things peacefully. I will come, but this time I will not be silent." She put on her coat and walked out of the room. The night rain had stopped, leaving a shimmering trail of light on the path. Before leaving the hotel, she looked back in the mirror. Her eyes were no longer those of a wounded person, but of someone ready for a fair conversation, with truth and with kindness. The voice slows down, deepens. Like a confession, justice is not about making people kneel, but about making them understand the value of standing up. She stepped outside and took a taxi to Grant Aviation headquarters. This meeting, she knew, would be more than just a business negotiation. It would be the beginning of change. The next morning, the sky over Seattle was gray. A cold wind blew through the high-rise windows of the Grant Aviation building. Dr. Maya Carter stepped out of the car, wearing a long beige coat, walking slowly but steadily. In her hand was a thick file. No one knew what was inside. The receptionist recognized her, slightly confused. "Hello, Dr. Carter. Mr. Grant is waiting in the conference room on the 30th floor." She smiled slightly. "I know." The elevator rose, the sound of metal machinery ringing steadily. In the mirror, her reflection was clear, a calm face, bright eyes, not a trace of anger. She whispered in her mind, "Don't let emotions dictate your actions. Let your actions teach them a lesson." When the door opened, Ethan Miles was waiting. "I just spoke to their board of advisors," he said quietly. "They want this over with. They think you just need a public apology. They'll soon understand I didn't come here to apologize." Maya replied, looking down the long hallway to the conference room. The wooden door opened, revealing a large, bright space with a long walnut conference table and neatly arranged leather chairs. At the head of the table sat a stern, silver-haired Samuel Grant, waiting. Beside him were several senior executives, including Ryan Holt, who had taken her seat yesterday. The air was thick. No one laughed. Maya placed the file on the table, her eyes moving from person to person, then stopping at Ryan. He avoided eye contact, adjusting his tie. Samuel spoke first, his voice hoarse but firm. "Carter, we are sorry about what happened. It was an unfortunate incident and does not reflect the values of Grant Aviation." She didn't interrupt. She just sat there, her hands clasped, her eyes looking straight ahead. When he stopped, she asked slowly, "Have you seen the video?" A silence. Samuel nodded. I did, but I believe Evelyn was just handling the situation according to procedure. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maya slightly raised the corner of her lips. I've heard that phrase 100 times. It wasn't intentional. But you know, Mr. Grant, it's those unintentional actions that create a system of prejudice. A system that makes people think it's okay to give up their seat to a white man. The conference room was silent. Ryan opened his mouth, but Samuel motioned for him to be quiet. I understand your feelings, Samuel said, his voice softening. We are willing to offer a formal apology and honorable compensation, if you feel it is necessary. Maya looked at him for a long time, her eyes no longer calm but cold as steel. I don't need money. I need responsibility. Yours, and the system you run. A human resources manager interrupted in a low voice. We can do short training on diversity and inclusion. That is industry practice. She replied, one training session cannot change the mindset. I want a mandatory program, lasting at least a year, for all employees, from flight attendants, pilots, to senior management. Ethan sat behind her, leaning slightly toward her, his eyes full of admiration. She continued, her voice clear, each word a knife in the complacency of the room. In addition, I want Grant Aviation to establish an Open Skies Scholarship Fund for aviation students of color. We can't talk about equity without opening doors for the next generation. Ryan chuckled. A charity. You want to turn this company into a social center. She turned around. Her voice still soft, but her eyes were cold. No, Mr. Holt. I just want to make it a place where people are respected as equals. Something you, it seems, haven't learned. No one spoke again. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. Samuel slowly exhaled, leaning back in his chair. Dr. Carter, you know we're in the middle of a merger. I don't want this to affect our shareholders. Neither do I, Maya replied. But you're wrong if you think I'm going to let this go. I invested in Grant Aviation not just for the profit, but because I believe it can be a symbol of change. Yesterday was just proof that that belief requires action, not just words. The light from the window fell on her face, drawing everyone in. There was something about her voice, soft yet strong, that even the most conservative people would not dare to ignore. Another director spoke up, his voice trembling. If we accept those terms, will you keep the deal? She replied without hesitation. I won't just keep, I'll expand. But my final condition is, I want to see the entire crew of GA-203 again within 24 hours. Everyone looked at each other in surprise. Samuel frowned. What are you going to do? I'm not punishing anyone. I want them to understand. By looking at me, listening to me, and knowing that there are wounds that can't be healed by an apology email. The conference room was silent again. Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if he couldn't believe the calmness. Samuel finally nodded, his voice slow. Okay, I will arrange it. Maya gathered the documents and stood up. Thank you. And remember, justice is not meted out. It is chosen by men. As she walked out of the room, Ryan let out a sigh. She will change the whole system. Samuel replied, his voice low. Perhaps that is what we need. In the hallway, Ethan caught up and asked softly, Are you sure they will cooperate? Not yet, but I'm sure they won't be able to go back to the way things were. She walked to the large glass door and looked out. It was dawn. The clouds were clearing, and the first rays of sunlight were peeking over the horizon. Ethan. Do you see, every time the sky clears, people forget it was raining before. Her voice was small, but full of meaning. Phone vibrates. Text from Leah. Breaking news, a major media outlet just invited you on air tonight to talk about the incident. She typed back, I won't say, my actions will speak for themselves. She turned off the screen, stood up, and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, she would meet those who had humiliated her again, not for revenge, but to begin a new journey, a journey to make justice a culture, not just a slogan. The narrator's voice dropped slightly, carrying an inner tone. People think I fight for my own honor, but actually, I fight for those who don't have a chance to speak up. The next morning, the lobby of Grant Aviation was more crowded than usual. Reporters crowded outside the gate, cameras trained on the building, the company banner reflected in the clear glass. Now, like a mirror exposing their mistakes. Maya Carter walked in with Ethan Miles. She was dressed more casually than usual, a white shirt and gray slacks, no jewelry, no show. The lobby fell silent as she passed, save for the soft click of her boots on the stone floor. The 15th floor conference room was ready. Inside, Evelyn Brooks, Ryan Holt, and the entire GA-203 crew sat in rows. The morning light shone through the large windows, reflecting on the anxious faces. Samuel Grant stood up as Maya entered. Thank you for coming. As promised, the entire flight crew is here. Maya nodded, not sitting down, but looking around the room. Her eyes fell on Evelyn, her head bowed, her hands clasped together. Ryan Holt leaned back in his chair, his gaze cold and defensive. She walked slowly to the middle of the room, placed a tape recorder on the table, and said in a steady voice, I didn't come here to hear apologies. I came to talk about what we have failed to face. A young employee, a flight attendant on flight GA-203, swallowed hard. Evelyn looked up, her eyes red. Carter, I really regret it. I was just following procedure. I didn't think. Maya interrupted gently. I know you don't think. That's the problem. Nobody thinks. Nobody stops to ask questions when they see a black man sitting in first class. The room was dead silent. Only the steady hum of the air conditioner could be heard. She continued, her voice slower, each word engraved in the air. When you asked me to leave my seat, you didn't just take away my seat. You took away the respect I had for this airline. But what hurts me more is that you did it without feeling anything was wrong. Evelyn bowed her head, her shoulders shaking. Another flight attendant burst into tears. The air was thick with shameful stares and silence. Ryan Holt suddenly smiled faintly, trying to break the silence. Come on, it's blown out of proportion. I said I was sorry. No one wanted this to happen. Maya looked straight at him, her voice low. You're right. No one wants it. But that doesn't mean no one is responsible. She turned to Samuel Grant. I want to start this conversation not to place blame, but to create change. I want every single person in this room to say how they feel, honestly. Samuel nodded slightly, signaling for the staff to start. A pilot stood up, his voice hoarse. I was in the cockpit that day when Evelyn reported a problem with a passenger. I didn't ask for details. I just assumed there was some kind of trouble. Now that I think about it, I should have asked more. Another young flight attendant said, tears rolling down her face. I remember at that moment. I saw her eyes, calm but sad. I was afraid that if it were me, I would have screamed. But she didn't, I think. Maybe that's why that clip touched so many people. Ethan sat by the door, watching silently. He understood that Maya was leading them in a way no media professional could not with guilt, but with truth. After a few minutes, Maya stood up and opened her laptop. The first slide appeared on the large screen, white text on a black background to see beyond color. She said, "This is the name of the training program I want Grant Aviation to implement. It teaches not just how to behave, but how to see." We will start with this story. A short video played, a clip Leah had shot, interspersed with data about racism in the airline industry. No one in the room dared look directly at the screen. When the video ended, there was only a heavy sigh. Evelyn looked up. Her voice choked. "I want to take the first course. I need to understand why I behave the way I do." Maya looked at her, her eyes softening. "That's the right way to start." She turned to Samuel Grant. "I will cover the full cost of the first course. If the company commits to maintaining it long term." Samuel pondered. He knew he had no choice. He nodded. "Okay, I agree." "But are you sure this will save the company's image?" Maya replied immediately. Without hesitation, "I'm not trying to save your image. I'm trying to save the soul of this company." The words rang out like church bells. All eyes turned to her. There was a moment of silence, then a few scattered claps, gradually growing louder. Ryan Holt was silent. He turned away, hiding his embarrassment. Samuel stood up, walked towards Maya, and held out his hand. "Dr. Carter, if you'll allow me, I'd like you to head the ethics committee at Grant Aviation." She looked at his hand for a moment and then shook it. "I will, if we are sincere." The meeting ended in a strange atmosphere. No one spoke, but everyone knew they had just witnessed something beyond the realm of crisis. As everyone left, Evelyn approached Maya. She clenched her fists, her eyes red. "Thank you for not ruining my life. I thought I would be fired." Maya looked deep into her eyes. "If I fired you, I would only reinforce your fear. I want you to face your mistakes so that they can be a lesson to others." Evelyn burst into tears, saying nothing more. As he left the room, Ethan asked softly, "Aren't you angry?" "Yes," Maya said quietly, "but if I let anger guide me, I will become the very thing I was fighting against." They stepped out into the hallway, where the light was warmer than in the morning. Outside the glass doors, the late sunlight filtered through the clouds and shone on the city, which was beginning to bustle. In that moment, Maya smiled slightly, a small smile, but full of meaning. "Ethan, you know the strangest thing, I don't feel like I won. I just feel like things are starting to look hopeful." She turned her head to look back at the conference room, where an unexpected meeting had just taken place, but also the beginning of a new journey. The narrator's voice lowered, carrying a slow and warm emotional rhythm. "There are wounds that don't need to be hidden. They need to be seen, so that no one else has to carry them again." 2 days after the historic dialogue, Seattle was drenched in sunshine. News of Sea Beyond Color was splashed across major newspapers. CNN, NBC, the Washington Post all carried pictures of Dr. Maya Carter walking out of Grant Aviation headquarters, her face calm, her eyes determined. But at the same time, social media began to split. One side hailed Maya as the woman redefining corporate justice, while the other sarcastically said she was using the crisis to burnish her reputation. She read all those lines in the hotel room, holding a cup of hot tea. The sunlight through the thin curtains shone on her face, revealing the fatigue after a stressful day. Ethan Miles walked in, laptop in hand. Maya. They're broadcasting a special news report about this afternoon's press conference live. Grant wants you and Mr. Samuel Grant to appear together. She looked at him and smiled slightly. You know, I never thought that one day I would have to stand next to the representative of the system that made me leave first class. But that's why people need to see that image, Ethan said. It's more powerful than any speech. She nodded. He was right. Sometimes symbols spoke louder than words. While getting ready, Maya received a text message from Leah Parker. They're trying to find me for an interview. Should I show up? She replied. If you feel ready, say so. But remember, let's talk about kindness, not anger. She believed that Leah, in her sincerity, would understand that. 3 p.m. The Grant Aviation headquarters was packed with reporters. The company flag was flying, but the atmosphere was tense. Hundreds of people were watching online, waiting to see if the company was truly changing or if it was just a political stunt. Samuel Grant stepped forward, his face pale but his eyes hard. Ladies and gentlemen, he said to dozens of cameras, Grant Aviation apologizes not only to Dr. Carter, but to all those who have ever been overlooked, who have been looked down upon, who have ever felt smaller than others. The auditorium echoed with the clicking of cameras. He paused for a moment, then looked toward the side door. And today, the person who made us face ourselves, Dr. Maya Carter. Applause rang out, and Maya stepped out. She wore a simple black suit, her hair tied back. Her steps were steady, but her eyes were gentle. She stood next to Samuel, looked around the room, and said, Thank you, Mr. Grant. Thank you all for coming. 2 days ago, I was just a passenger kicked out of my seat. Today, I stand here, not to talk about pain, but to talk about opportunity. She stopped, her gaze directed toward the lenses as if she wanted to speak directly to each person watching through the screen. When we experience injustice, our first instinct is to get angry. But if we learn to use anger to illuminate rather than burn, it becomes a force for change. See beyond color is not an apology. It's a commitment. We want passengers to feel not just safe on board, but respected as human beings. There was a burst of applause. The reporters took notes. Samuel bowed his head, as if admitting some responsibility. But in the crowd, Ryan Holt was still sitting in the VIP row, his face cold. He leaned over and whispered to his assistant, She is turning the company into her stage. A whisper was heard over the microphone of a nearby reporter. Within minutes, social media was abuzz. Ryan Holt, dissing Maya Carter at a press conference. Ethan saw the news and hurried to Maya's side as soon as she finished speaking. The news is spreading. They heard Ryan. Good, she said softly, her eyes still on the auditorium. Sometimes light needs to reflect shadows to make people see better. She walked over to Samuel and saw Evelyn Brooks standing behind the staff seats, holding a piece of paper in her trembling hand. Maya nodded slightly at her. Evelyn understood and stepped up to the podium, her voice shaking with emotion. I was the one who asked Dr. Carter to leave first class. I was wrong. Not because I hate anyone, but because I let fear of reprimand make me choose the easier path, the path of silence. She paused, tears falling, then continued. But thanks to her, I understood that respect is not a process, it is a choice, and today I choose to change. The entire audience stood up and applauded. Maya was silent for a moment, not because of pride, but because she had touched what she most wanted to see: awakening. After the press conference, Maya and Ethan returned to the car. On the way, the radio kept playing her and Evelyn's speeches. The host said this could be a turning point in the U.S. airline industry. For the first time, a black CEO is forcing change from within an entire corporation. Ethan smiled. You hear them. They call you a symbol. I don't want to be a symbol. Maya replied softly. I just want to be human. That afternoon, when she returned to the hotel, she opened the window. The late afternoon sunlight dyed the room a golden yellow. On the street below, peaceful protesters were holding up signs that read, "Respect is not optional." She looked at them for a long time, then said softly to herself, "Perhaps this is just the beginning." The phone rang, an unfamiliar call from New York. On the other end, a deep male voice said, "I'm a producer for 60 Minutes. We want to do a feature on her journey, not a scandal, but the story of how she made the system look back." Maya smiled softly. If that story can make someone think differently about justice, I'm all for it. When the call ended, she looked over at Ethan, who was still standing silently by the window. "Ethan," she asked, "do you think I'm doing the right thing?" "I think, Maya, sometimes the right thing isn't the easy path, but it's the only one that will let you sleep soundly at night." She nodded. Outside, the Seattle sunset glowed, light and shadow merging. A new chapter was unfolding, not just for Maya Carter, but for all those forced to bow their heads on flights of prejudice. The narrative closes with a gentle tone, with a hint of contemplation and healing. Justice is not a moment. It is a journey, and each step, however small, moves the world. 2 weeks after the press conference, the sky over Seattle was once again its signature gray. But, unlike last time, the clouds were not heavy. They were like the calm after a heavy rain. The media hasn't calmed down. Maya Carter's name is all over the news. From morning talk shows to evening podcasts, people are talking, praising, arguing. A black female student in Texas posted a video saying, "I used to be afraid to dream big, but thanks to Dr. Carter, I know I can fly high." The video got 3 million views in a day. It was no longer Maya's story. It was a movement. But behind the lights, Maya was troubled. In her makeshift office in Seattle, she sat in front of a screen, reading Grant Aviation's Public Relations Crisis Report. Revenue had dropped 11% in 2 weeks. The stock had fallen slightly, and Ryan Holt had been forced off the board. Ethan Miles walked in and placed the file on the table. "I know you don't want to fire anyone, but the shareholder pressure is huge. Ryan is blaming you, claiming that you wrecked the company with a hypocritical campaign." Maya did not raise her head, just softly replied, "People always think justice is something that can be measured in money. But, Ethan, sometimes loss is the only way to awaken." She looked out the window. The rain was as thin as mist, covering the silent streets. "I'm not afraid of storms. I'm only afraid of people forgetting why they started." Just then, the phone rang. It was Evelyn Brooks. Her voice was trembling. "Carter, I just arrived at the airport. A group of passengers recognized me and started cursing at me, calling me a racist. I don't blame them, but I was scared." Maya was silent for a few seconds, then said softly, "Evelyn, justice doesn't just heal the victim, it also saves the wrongdoer. Don't hide. You're paying the price, but it's the price of being reborn. On the other end of the line, Evelyn hiccuped. You may hate me, but you still protect me. Why? Because if I don't, Maya replied slowly, then I will become the person you fear. The call ended. Maya sat still. She understood that justice is not all light. It has its shadows, too. That afternoon, Samuel Grant came to see her at the office. He looked older than before. His hair was grayer, but his eyes were light. Dr. Carter, you were right. I thought you were just putting on airs. But now I see I've been keeping my eyes closed for too long. He put a file on the table. I want you to sign on as co-founder of the Open Skies Initiative. It will be a long-term social project, opening up career opportunities for young people of color in the aviation industry. Maya looked at him, her eyes softening. I will sign, but only if you promise. This is not to whitewash the past, but to pave the way for the future. Samuel nodded sincerely. You have my promise. They shook hands, a handshake not of two businessmen, but of two men who had learned to believe in what was right. That evening, Maya accepted an interview on 60 Minutes. The host asked, Do you think we've won? She smiled, shaking her head slightly. I don't think it's a victory. I think it's a beginning. One day, if a little black girl can sit in first class and no one will think she's special that day, we'll have truly won. The whole studio was silent. The host also bowed his head, then whispered, That is the most beautiful answer I have ever heard. After the show, Maya received thousands of thank you emails. One man in Atlanta wrote, I used to be a flight attendant. I was wrong to keep silent when my colleague was insulted. Now I understand. Silence is also a sin. The letters flowed into her heart like small streams, not noisy, but warm. But in the shadow of that success, an undercurrent was brewing. An anonymous post appeared online, alleging that Maya was using the incident to take control of Grant Aviation. Word spread quickly. The hashtag, Power Over Justice, trended. Ethan rushed into the room, placing the phone in front of her. They're smearing you. Some former Grant employees say you planned the takeover from the beginning. I know, Maya said softly. Ryan Holt isn't done. He lost, so he wants to drag me down with him. Do you want me to fire back at the media? No. You let them talk. When the facts stand, the rumors fall. She turned back to the screen and continued writing a thank you letter to a student of color who had won an Open Skies scholarship. In the letter, she wrote, Don't let the world tell you how much you're worth. Value yourself by your kindness. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration and worry. He knew she was strong, but he also knew that, deep down, she still carried scars from the past, from her poor childhood, from the times she was looked at with contempt. That night, Maya did not sleep. She went out onto the balcony, looking out at the city lights stretching out like stars. A breeze blew, carrying the coolness and smell of the sea. In the reflection of the glass door, she saw herself, not the celebrated CEO, but the little girl who had sat on the airport waiting chair, watching other passengers being attended to while she was ignored. The voice is slow and warm, like an inner monologue. Sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. It comes with quiet nights in front of the mirror, asking, Do I still believe in what's right? Phone vibrates. Text from Leah Parker. I'm going to a talk show about citizen media. I'm going to talk about you, but not as a victim, but as someone who taught me that courage can start with just pressing the record button. Maya smiled slightly. Outside, the Seattle sky was sparkling, and she knew that, despite the media storm that had not yet passed, faith was more deeply rooted than ever. People may forget my name, she thought, but if they remember that respect is not a luxury, I will be satisfied. 3 weeks after the historic press conference, Grant Aviation headquarters looked different. See Beyond color posters hung in the hallways. Employees lined up to sign up for their first training session. Maya Carter stood silently on the 20th floor balcony, looking down at the square where groups of young people had gathered, holding up banners in support of the campaign. She smiled slightly, but the smile did not last long. In her hand was a newspaper with the following bold text: Maya Carter, savior of justice or manipulator of power. The article, written by a famous writer, quoted inside sources claiming that she used the incident to take control of Grant Aviation, and that all her actions were purely strategic. She folded the newspaper, her eyes distant. Ethan Miles walked in, placing a cup of coffee on the table. I did some research. Ryan Holt hired that media group. He was working behind the scenes with 2 conservative shareholders who wanted to take down Samuel Grant. I guess so. Maya replied softly. They can't beat me with the truth, so they'll use doubt. You know what's scarier than a lie? Ethan. It's when people want to believe it. She nodded. They were both silent for a moment, just listening to the light rain falling on the window. That afternoon, the first training session began. Over 100 personnel, from pilots, technicians to personnel, were present. Evelyn Brooks also sat in the second row, her face still showing a trace of guilt. Maya stepped up to the podium. No script, no teleprompter. She spoke slowly. I'm not here to tell anyone how to be a better person. I just want us to reflect on how a small act can make someone feel invisible. She tells the story of Flight GA203 but doesn't name anyone, just talks about what it feels like to be disrespected. No blame, just the truth and gentle pain. Evelyn looked up, tears rolling down her face. When the lesson ended, she approached, her voice trembling. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Today, I realized I don't need to forgive to be at peace. I need to forgive to change. Maya touched her shoulder gently, smiling warmly. I had to learn that too. That same evening, Maya received an email from Samuel Grant. Some shareholders are planning to hold a vote of no confidence in me next week. They claim that I am being unduly influenced by you. You should prepare yourself. She finished reading. Thoughtful. Justice. She realized always had a price. Every real change scared those in power. That night, Ethan called her out to the hotel balcony. The Seattle sky was sparkling with lights, but there were no stars. Maya, if they really attack, do you intend to counterattack? No, she replied, looking away. I will let them reveal themselves. The truth does not need my protection. I only need to stand still, but that could cost you everything. Ethan, I didn't start this to keep my seat. I did it for the people who don't have any seats. That made him speechless. She wasn't just talking about first class, she was talking about the equality of every seat in life. 3 days later, the shareholders' meeting took place. The meeting room was luxurious, but the atmosphere was heavy as lead. Ryan Holt appeared, holding a document in his hand, smiling sarcastically. Gentlemen, I have evidence that Dr. Carter deliberately manipulated the media to discredit the company in order to gain control. He turned on the projector a series of elaborately edited fake emails. A few people whispered, suspicious glances directed at Maya. She sat still, her gaze calm. When Ryan finished, she said softly, "Mero Holt, may I see the original?" "Of course," he said triumphantly. She stood up, walked to the console, and plugged in her USB. The screen showed the clip that Leah Parker had made public last night, a leaked audio recording in which Ryan told a reporter, "I will bring that woman to her knees. The whole country will remember that she does not belong in first class." The room was silent. Ryan's face was pale. He looked around, but no one dared to answer. Maya Key sang Samuel. "I don't need anyone being humiliated, but this company needs to see who is really dragging it down." Samuel stood up, his voice low. "Holt, the board suspends your shareholder status effective today." Ryan was speechless. He left the room, his boots echoing down the long hallway, heavy as the echoes of shattered prejudices. When the meeting ended, Samuel turned to Maya. "I owe you a debt of gratitude, not just for saving Grant Aviation, but for saving me from blindness. No one owes anyone anything, sir. We're just beginning to learn to look again." She left the room and walked down the hallway, bathed in the late afternoon sunlight. She felt no sense of triumph, only a quiet serenity. That evening, she received a text message from Leah. "You know, I met a group of students at school today. They said that, thanks to you, they want to become flight attendants, pilots, flight managers. I think you changed something bigger than this company." Maya read the message and felt her heart warm. She looked out the window and saw the plane gliding across the night sky, its lights flashing. She spoke softly, as if to herself. If one person can change the way the world sees each other, then a wound can become a pair of wings. A month has passed since Ryan Holt left the company. Grant Aviation has bounced back faster than anyone expected. The first flights under the new slogan, "Fly with Respect," were well received by passengers. Online, images of the multi-ethnic crew circulated with the caption, "Not just flying, but moving forward together." Everyone praised Maya Carter as the person who initiated the most humane reform in the American aviation industry. But amidst the glory, Maya felt a void in her heart. These days, she slept little and ate carelessly. Every time she stood before the mirror, she saw her own eyes reflected back, strong but filled with weariness. Ethan Miles realized that. One morning, he walked into his office, put his coffee cup on the table, and said softly, "You did what no one else dared. But Maya, you can't save the world." She smiled softly. "I'm not trying to save the world. Ethan, I just don't want to stay silent when I know I can do something different. But you are human too. You cannot carry the sins of others on your shoulders." "I do not," she replied, her gaze fixed on the window. "I'm just passing through it." Outside, the sky was a calm gray. A plane had just taken off, bearing the new Grant Aviation logo. The words "See Beyond Color" were printed in glittering letters. Maya watched, sighing softly. That afternoon, she was invited to attend the opening ceremony of the first training course for new employees. She sat in the back row, quietly observing Evelyn Brooks, who had now changed beyond belief. Evelyn stood on the stage, her voice confident, her eyes shining. "I used to be someone who didn't dare ask questions, but thanks to Dr. Carter, I learned that silence can sometimes be complicity. From today on, I will teach my staff to see with their hearts before they see with their eyes." Applause broke out. Maya bowed her head, her lips trembling slightly. It was a rare moment when she allowed herself to be moved. After the ceremony, Evelyn approached. "I want to thank you again. Without you, I don't know what my life would be like." Maya replied softly, "Evelyn, sometimes we don't need anyone to save us. We just need someone to believe that we can change." Evelyn smiled and left. She left Maya standing alone in the great hall, where pictures of the new crew members were hung on the walls. The faces of the young people were beaming in their eyes. Maya was more than just a CEO. She was proof that kindness could triumph over prejudice. That evening, when she returned to her temporary apartment, she opened her laptop. A new email appeared, without a sender. "Your justice is just a facade. I will make everyone see that you are not as innocent as they think. No signature, no address." But Maya knew who sent it. Ryan Holt hadn't disappeared. She looked at the words. Not afraid, only pity. People only try to put others down when they can't rise up. She muttered, then deleted the email without saving it. That night, she couldn't sleep. In her dream, she was at the same airport where young Maya Carter was asked by security to undergo further screening because she didn't look like someone who could fly first class. She remembered the shame, the cold stares of those around her. When he woke up, tears were still on his pillow. Ethan called to ask, "Are you okay?" "I was just dreaming about the past," she replied. "But maybe it's the past's way of reminding me why I started." The next day, she arrived early at the office, in the lobby. Leah Parker was waiting, now a host for a social media channel about justice and human rights. "I came to thank you," Leah said. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have believed that my little voice could make a difference." "No, Leah," Maya smiled. "It's people like you that make this matter. Your one video opened up a conversation the world has avoided for decades." Leah hugged her, a warm embrace that felt like a connection between two generations, one who had weathered the storm and one learning to fly. In the afternoon, Maya attended the quarterly report meeting. Samuel Grant announced the figure's profits were up again. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. He told the board, "We didn't just fix a mistake. We learned to listen." Everyone applauded. Maya said nothing, just smiled. She didn't need fame. She just needed to know that everyone in this room would walk away with a different heart. Late at night, when everyone left, Ethan lingered with her. "Maya, are you tired?" "Yes," she admitted, "but it's the good kind of tired. Like after a long flight, when you know you've arrived." Ethan smiled and poured her a cup of tea. "You know, I've worked for a lot of leaders, but no one has made me believe in what I do like you. Don't believe me, Ethan. Believe in what's right? I'm just repeating it." The two of them sat in silence, looking out the window where the night lights reflected on the glass. A gentle breeze blew, carrying with it the distant sound of an airplane engine. Maya said softly, as if to herself, "Justice is not a destination. It is a journey, and the important thing is that we do not stop halfway." The yellow light shone on her face, tired but full of life. She knew that tomorrow there would be new challenges, new criticisms, but she also knew that every step she took, no matter how small, would make the world a little fairer. 6 months have passed since Grant Aviation returned to the ranks of America's most reliable airlines. The snowfields around Seattle are beginning to melt. The city is damp but sparkling. In her top-floor office, Dr. Maya Carter is closing the last files. On her desk was a plane ticket, a domestic flight to Atlanta, not for work, but to return to her birthplace. After nearly 20 years away, Ethan Miles walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one down and said softly, "I heard you were leaving. Is that true?" "Yes." Maya smiled slightly. "I think the time has come when this sky no longer needs me to hold it up. It has learned to be clear on its own." Ethan was silent. He understood. The woman never left because she was tired. She only left when she was sure everything was stable. "Samuel would be sad," he said. "He always thought of you as the one who saved the company's soul. I don't save people, Ethan. I just help them see themselves in the mirror. The rest, they move on, outside." The Seattle rain fell gently, like a gentle goodbye. Just then, Samuel Grant entered. He was wearing a long coat and holding an envelope in his hand. "I heard rumors that you were planning to run away without saying a word." He smiled gently. "I'm not good at goodbyes," Maya replied. "Then let's call this a thank you." He placed the envelope on the table. "I want you to see this before you go." Inside the envelope was a draft of the Carter Fellowship Plan, a scholarship fund named after her, supporting students of color studying aviation. Maya read it, her eyes sparkling. "Samuel, this is too much." "No." He laughed. "The next generation needs to know that justice is not a slogan. It is something that can be learned, taught, and lived." She stood up and shook his hand, but this time it was one of gratitude, not of business. In the evening, Maya stopped by the new training center where Evelyn Brooks was teaching. Evelyn had just finished her last lesson on understanding the unconscious in communication. When she saw Maya, she stopped and smiled brightly. "I assume you came to check on your former student." "No." Maya replied, "I came to tell you how proud I am of you." The whole class applauded. Evelyn bowed her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "Without you, I wouldn't be here today." "No." "Evelyn." Maya shook her head. "I just opened the door. You're the one who walked through after class." She left the center and walked down a hallway lined with photos of staff. In the far corner was a photo of Leah Parker, with the caption, "Every big change starts with a single action." Maya paused, touching the frame. She remembered the day Leah sent her first video shaky, scared, but brave. Now, Leah was a social justice television host. A new generation was rising, and Maya knew she could leave without fear. Back at the apartment, she opened the window. The rain had stopped. In the distance, the airport lights glowed like the Milky Way. On the table, the phone flashed. It was a news alert. Ryan Holt publishes memoir Behind the Curtain of Justice, revealing the truth about Maya Carter. She looked at the text, then smiled. People can rewrite memories, but they cannot rewrite the truth, she whispered. Instead of reacting, she sent Ethan a text message. "Never mind that book. Time will be the fairest editor." He replied shortly, "You always know how to calm every storm." As night fell, Maya packed her suitcase. There wasn't much in it, a few notebooks, a picture of her mother, and her old boarding pass for flight GA-203. The pass was crumpled, but to her, it was a reminder of an awakening the day a woman was pulled from first class because of the color of her skin, and the day she chose to change the system. The next morning, Seattle Airport, where the story begins, greeted her with gentle sunshine. She walked through the VIP area, the place that had deeply hurt her last year. Now, the staff recognized her, bowed and smiled. "Good morning, Dr. Carter." We are honored to serve you." She replied with a calm smile, "No pride, only peace." As the plane took off, she looked down at the city. The light reflected off the wings, sparkling like new faith. Ethan sat next to her and turned to ask, "Have you ever thought that just one small moment could change the world?" "I'm not changing the world," she said slowly. "I'm just reminding the world that it already has good inside it." At that moment, the loudspeaker announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are flying over Seattle. It is 28 degrees Fahrenheit outside. We are at an altitude of 35,000 feet." She closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the chair. In her dream, she saw familiar faces. Her mother, Leah, Evelyn, Samuel, Ethan, all smiling, as if to say her mission had been accomplished. The plane passed through the clouds, sunlight streaming into the cabin. Maya opened her eyes slightly and looked outside. Finally, she whispered, "The sky's big enough for everyone." And there, in the middle of the sky, the woman who had been dragged out of her first-class seat was now sitting in that very same spot, but not because of the ticket, but because of the value. The light shone on her face, peaceful, calm, full of hope. A chapter closed, but what she left behind was not a story of pain, but a reminder true justice is when each person is treated as a human being. The story of Dr. Maya Carter reminds us that true strength is not in loud victories, but in quiet dignity. When life tests our worth, when we are treated unfairly or looked down upon, our response defines who we are far more than the moment itself. Maya didn't shout or seek revenge. She chose integrity, reason, and grace. And through that, she changed not just a company, but a culture. For those of us who have lived long enough to see the world turn through decades of progress and pain, her story is a gentle call. It is never too late to stand for what is right, and never too early to teach others respect. Justice is not found in laws alone. It begins in everyday kindness, in how we treat strangers, and how we speak when no one watches. So, when life gives you a choice between silence and truth, choose truth, even if your voice trembles, because dignity, once reclaimed, shines brighter than any spotlight. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real stories of courage, compassion, and hope to life. Together, let's keep the conversation about respect and justice alive.